Hey, hey, folks, we are live. Welcome. You are here with myself, Lee Matthew Jackson, my fellow Mavericks, and our esteemed guests. Hang on a second. Remove. Right, are you still there, guys? We're still there.
Yes.
Great. So there was a massive delay just then. That was a conversation me and Peter had a few minutes ago. So, right, start out. Take two. Welcome, everybody. We are here with me, Jan. We've got Dan. We've got Diane. Peter will be joining us shortly. She's just working out a few tech issues, which is awesome. We're going to be talking about inclusion, and its impact on our well-being. This is part 2. So be sure to check out the comments after this live stream because we will be linking to the last conversation that we had. We've got a few hard-hitting questions for our esteemed colleagues here, Dan and Diane. But before we do that, I would really love, starting with Dan this time, a little intro from each person. So we'll go Dan, Diane, Jan, and then myself, and then we will launch into the questions. So Dan, give us your 60-second elevator pitch.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, Lee. I really appreciate the opportunity to come here again and join you. I'm Dan Mabey. I'm the founder of Big Orange Heart. We are a registered charity that supports and promotes positive wellbeing and mental health within the remote working communities. I'm really pleased to be able to come here again and discuss this important topic. So thank you.
Nice one. That was about a 20-second elevator pitch. I'm impressed. Diane, beat that.
Hi, I'm Diane Wallace, and I'm a freelance web developer specializing in custom WordPress themes and plugins. And I also help Dan occasionally with WordPress London. And I'm really, really excited to be back here talking about inclusivity and its impact on mental well-being, because I thought that it was such an important subject, and we had so much more to say. So.
Yeah, it really felt like we only scratched the surface, didn't we, last time? And I had quite a lot of aha moments myself. Jan?
Yeah, I'm the host of WP Mastery. I also run the WP Agency Summit that's coming up in October this year. And behind the scenes, there might be coming something with the Big Orange Heart that we have to talk about in the background first before we can announce this.
I didn't even know about that, so I'm excited to hear about what that would be. Okay, so everyone, you just had a little peek behind the curtain. Let's keep your eyes on that. My name is Lee Matthew Jackson. I am the host of the Agency Trailblazer podcast and the host of the Agency Transformation Live conference that we have every single year. So, folks, let's have a conversation. We want to talk about inclusivity, and that subject in its own right, guys, actually raises people's hackles a little bit. People get offended. So our first question really is why do you think people get offended when we start to have conversations around inclusivity? I've had people kind of get abrupt, get rude, get sharp, or shut the conversation down with me before it's even begun. I'll let either of you take that.
Well, I've seen this as well. Every time that you raise this, say on social media, people get defensive, and I think that it's two things. I think one is because nobody wants to believe that they have been acting in a way that causes harm, and I think if we all look at ourselves, that we can all say that perhaps we're guilty. Two, kind of we're talking about privilege, and I know that lots of people, when you say to them that you say have white privilege, lots of people get really upset because they remember, they think of all of the people that maybe have more privilege than they do, but they don't, and they find it very difficult to recognize that still means that they have more privilege than somebody else. No one's saying that you're Jacob Rees-Mogg, who has a lot of privilege for a lot of different reasons, but kind of you can still have more privilege than someone else that is disadvantaged through race, religion, sex, sexuality, a whole host of things. And I think that nobody likes being told that they're a bad person, but that's not really kind of what you're saying when you talk about inclusivity. What we're talking about is, trying to be more aware, trying to do better, but I think that's why people get defensive. And I've talked a lot, so I'll let Dan say something.
Well, I'll follow up quickly as well on the privilege, because I used to, I understand the concept of white privilege. What I've also learned to understand, though, is it does not necessarily mean that we haven't had a bad life and we haven't suffered. It just means that we haven't suffered because of, say, the color of our skin, etc. So we still will have had a rough life. It's not saying that we are somehow better off than everybody else, but it's just we've not had that extra stigma, or whatever the right word is, attached to it. Now, hopefully, we're going to get Peach to join us as well. Carry on, Dan.
I think part of that is actually the inability to be able to identify with the with the issues that individuals face when they are excluded. And why do people get angry around it? Because there's a potential for a lack of understanding in relation to the experiences that others have experienced when it comes to being excluded.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's as Diane mentioned, it's such a wide-ranging topic. I mean, we could be talking about age discrimination, sexual discrimination, gender, race. There are so many aspects when it comes to talking about inclusivity that it can be very easy to start getting into a situation where individuals can start to feel defensive because they may not want to look inside, internally, and it's a difficult thing, isn't it, to look inside and say, actually, you know what, I'm doing this thing wrong.
Maybe people don't even think about that. Like when you're doing something, for example, when I ran the WP Agency Summit last year and I had like 27 males and 4 female speakers, I wasn't even thinking about this stuff. I just looked at who do I know and who can I reach out to and who would speak at my event, rather than do I have enough males to females? Do I have people with darker skin tones too, which I certainly didn't. So it's so many things that I wouldn't say have almost no importance in our daily life, but they don't impact our lives. Like if we do not follow through on inclusivity in what we do, most of the times it doesn't have any consequences. Just when it does, the consequences are severe.
I think that's the thing. I think that unless you're directly impacted, it's easy to ignore. It's easy to ignore something. It doesn't affect your day-to-day life. So it's kind of, in a way, kind of more comfortable to not think about it. But as soon as you start to think about it, it's a really uncomfortable feeling to recognize that you have some advantage. And like I said, that's not belittling the disadvantages that you might have due to your personal circumstances, but you still might have some advantages over someone else. For example, I'm a working class woman. That disadvantages me to that level. But if I was a black working class woman, I would be further disadvantaged. That's, so we can recognize that people have disadvantages, but still have advantages over someone else. As soon as you recognize that, that's an uncomfortable feeling, because as soon as you recognize that, you really have to do something about it. And that is why I think that people get so defensive, because as soon as you acknowledge there's a problem, then you acknowledge that you have to do something about it. It's much more comfortable to not think about it.
Yeah, and also I think, can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry, I've been having issues, but I'm here. And also, I think that it should start from everyone really just thinking, there is no way that I can know how anyone else feels. Absolutely anybody. I think that should be really the starting point. And I think that is something that a lot of people struggle with. I don't know if it's a generational thing, but I know that my father really found it very hard to understand that. And he was a good man. And I'm not talking in terms of inclusion, but, in terms even of his relationships in general. And I have noticed that many people seem to have that issue, that they find it hard to realize that they don't know how anybody else feels. It comes up again and again on social media, especially people having conversations, and I think that should be a really essential thing. But I think there's a question that a lot of us have. How do we start then? Let's say that you have an agency, which is where most of us here in this environment have. How do you even begin to create policies that start from inclusivity? What would you suggest that people can do?
So it's a really interesting issue, this, and Diane and I were actually talking about this earlier. And one of the first responses that I have to that is talk to your team and start a conversation around inclusivity. But the issue with that is that if you haven't gone down this route of looking at inclusivity, you can potentially be looking at a team of individuals that already look like a certain shape, certain color, and that may not actually necessarily be the best place, because you're starting from potentially an unconscious bias already. So it's a really tricky place to start from. But if you have the ability to have conversations with your team, but with that open mindset and that understanding of, are we having this conversation with an unconscious bias to start with, is I think a really interesting place to start when it comes to creating your policies.
We were saying, weren't we, as well, that kind of probably you've spent the last 5 years of your life and you're really proud. You've got this agency, you've got this wonderful culture. And I said to you, didn't I, Dan, that culture usually means that you've selected people that are like you, which is problematic to start with. When you're building something, you're really proud of what you've built, and to have this conversation means that you have to assume that your actions are not benign. So you have to assume that this company that you're really proud of and this culture that you're really proud of, you have to assume that because there will be there will be problems. And so you have to start from that premise. What mistakes are we making? Who are we excluding? How are we excluding them? And that is difficult, like I said, because you've probably spent years of your life and you're really proud of what you've achieved. And then you kind of have to look at your baby and kind of go, we've made mistakes. And like I said, especially if you're building a company, the tendency is to select people that you feel are on your wavelength, that you have things in common with. And that means that a lot of the time your staff might look very much like yourself. So
wouldn't be a solution to that, maybe, is defining the culture beforehand, because I am sure that someone that looks completely unlike me still would probably have some things, some ethics that we share. And like, for instance, I was brought up a Catholic. I've since lapsed in many ways, but my ethos, I've realized that my ethos is actually the same. I may not share the beliefs anymore or completely reject other things, but basically so many things I look back and say, yeah, I am definitely my mother's daughter. Do you know what I mean? So maybe, this would make me very similar to someone who was raised in a completely different environment, different skin color, different gender, everything. So maybe choosing what really defines it, because culture can be it's a very important word, but it can be a really empty one unless it's defined by very important things. So, artisan coffee is not culture. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Fashion is not culture. So if you decide that your culture is a certain ethos, then you shouldn't have that problem. If it's real. So maybe that's somewhere to start from.
I think that's good. I think that's a good point. If you started like an agency and kind of the ideal situation would be to start and go, right, kind of, we're not going to make these mistakes. We're going to be inclusive and we're going to write that into our DNA. But my experience is usually that, kind of that usually people are thinking of other things when they're trying to build an agency. But there are, there are absolutely, if you write into your DNA, there couldn't be any better way to start than to say, these are these will be our guiding principles. And you're right, culture isn't coffee.
It's tasty though.
Do you know what I mean?
It should be, like in an ideal world, it should be it should be a list of ideals that you have and that you hope you share with the other people that will join you on your journey.
Yeah, I think writing an equality statement, that as as a starting point for this, in a very practical sense, is a really good place to start. What is it that you as a company find acceptable? What is your acceptable levels? In terms of your.
And I think that would be easier than, as you were saying, Dan. Say if you have a huge company, or a relatively big company with like hundreds, maybe even thousands of people. In a way, that's going to be much more difficult to tackle bias in that kind of situation. That's going to take a lot longer, I think, to turn around than a small company. Or, as Peter said, if you start with these principles in mind, you're going to be, in a much better situation.
Yeah. And on that note, when we're working with others, I find that I myself sometimes have assumptions that I subconsciously make that exclude others. First of all, what are there any like common assumptions that you see come up over and over again in your conversations? And then what can we do about that?
So we were talking about language, and Dan had a particular story, and it's not just language around native speakers as well, but I have friends that are on the autistic spectrum, and so then you find that language, and I was saying that when being English, when you're brought up, you're told to make directions sort of like more ambiguous. It's considered polite. So you say, could you do this? Would you like to do this? When what you really mean is do this. And that can be confusing.
Would you possibly mind?
My wife does that all the time.
May I bother you?
And this is a cultural thing.
May I bother you?
Yes, and a lot. And it's not just people. It's not just people that have autism. And it's it can even be like Americans are much more used to being direct. So even Americans find English people quite difficult to understand because we have this idea of it's better manners to be ambiguous. But then we expect people to know that we're actually giving you a direction. When we say, if it's not too much trouble, could you possibly, what we're actually saying is, do it!
I also find that really condescending when I hear that. I'm like, oh.
It's the English language lends itself to so many issues, doesn't it? We've had an experience recently where I was using a term within our team. We were talking about signposting individuals to external services, and I'd assume the language that I was using was understandable by the full team, but an individual did actually come up and say that, Dan, I don't actually understand what you mean by signpost, and we realised that actually. From a US perspective, referral was a far more obvious term for them. So I'd assumed that the language that I was using was appropriate for everybody in that conversation, but actually it meant that this individual didn't have necessarily all of the information that was needed off the back of that conversation.
And on that, actually, I think that we're not even clear enough about who we are including, because and that's something that actually someone made me notice on Twitter, someone that you may know, Diane, because I'm pro bicycles. I think bicycles in big cities, they're the solution and so on. But hey, bicycles are not that inclusive to people who have mobility issues that can't be on bicycles. And you go, damn, so is your agency accessible? Can a wheelchair get into your agency easily? Can a wheelchair move around? If you were mind you, probably gone on remote now, so that would be fine. But is that something that we're thinking about? Because it's not just about gender and race and other issues. It's also about things like that. And I don't know if we're thinking about that often enough. I feel like we often just not fixate is the wrong word, but are we inclusive enough even when we're talking about inclusivity? Is what I wonder.
Yeah,
certainly,
no,
a big issue for us is events and making sure that our events are in venues that are inclusive. enable individuals to gain access. And I mean, there are many issues that need to be considered when it comes to delivering an event, and equally that applies to obviously office space. If you're employing individuals and they, for whatever reason, are unable to work remotely, but of course, even working
there's
remotely,
also that.
we still need to ensure that individuals are able to deliver their work through a remote means. We can't assume that the tools that we have, everybody is able to use.
When I
there was this thing.
Yeah, carry on.
No, you carry on, Lee.
All right, then. I was going to say, when I launched the Agency Trailblazer podcast, for years, I never did transcriptions. I figured no one reads transcriptions, but that's because I'd made the assumption that everybody hears, because that's what I do. So we started investing in transcriptions for every single episode. The other assumption I'd then made was that it would be fine if someone just did everything word for word verbatim. But that's not helpful, because we don't talk sometimes in an intelligible way if it was written down. Sometimes we talk in 2-minute sentences with no punctuation, etc., and it's very hard to consume. So one thing we're really trying to work on at the moment with ours is to try and, we're still keeping the essence of what was said, but trying to chunk it down so that it's a bit more readable, which, to be honest, we're finding very difficult, and we've not had that much feedback on, but it's certainly something that we're looking at. Peter, did you want to make your follow-up point, and then I'll ask the next question?
Yeah, sure. No, it's fine. I was going to say that that's something that came up during the virus, and people who actually, everybody was going remote, but then it's like, well, this is a very privileged situation to be in. So those of us who are privileged enough can go remote, and others can't, or children from family with lower income who maybe do not have a computer for each kid, and things like that. So there's so much to take into consideration, and it's so easy to assume that your normal is everybody's normal. It's so easy, and I think that all of us have done it at some stage. So we just have to really widen our view, I think, is the point, and never assume. I think that's the big thing, is just never ever assume, and always ask, always.
Yeah. Which is
something that when you do.
I was going to agree with you, Peter. It's like the thing you must always do is talk to people, ask people what they need, ask people what barriers they face.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, basically, if you do UX, that's it. That's what you do. You just keep asking.
So there was an issue in the community raised just a few weeks ago where a new event was launched in the agency space, and the entire lineup was male.
Yeah.
And so a few of us pointed that out to them and said, "Hey, what's going on here? You've got they've got a whole load of blokes here," and people were joking about bro marketing and everything else that was going on, because this was essentially 12 to 20 guys, and one of the arguments in return to that, where we'd said, where's the female representation here, was that everybody had been chosen on merit. So my question to you guys is that a valid argument?
So I think no, for two reasons. One, without actually knowing what their selection process was, I can't believe that they couldn't find any, kind of a more diverse section of people that were highly skilled, highly knowledgeable around their subject. So I have to believe that there was systemic problems in their selection process. And I was saying to Dan, without knowing what their selection process is, it's quite difficult. But I know that we talked before about tackling unconscious bias in the last program, where we, kind of the first round is done blind. But I said to Dan that even then, when you're just looking at the title and an abstract, there is a danger that, the abstract could be swaying you. So are you just selecting people, when I say abstract, I mean the summary, are you just selecting people that can write, a good abstract or summary doesn't necessarily mean they're good speakers, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're knowledgeable. So does bias creep in there? Anyway, we try and mitigate as much as we can, but I think at a certain point, you have to make sure that your systems are, as unbiased as possible. But I did say to Dan, because some people are so disadvantaged, that there is a certain amount of which you have to actually redress the balance. You have to tip the balance at a certain point and sort of say, let's look at our lineup. It's not good, and there's a problem here. We're not getting enough, or we're not getting enough of a mix of people, whether that's women or people, from the BME community. So I think at that point that there has to be a point at which you go, right, we're actually going to prioritize these people that are highly skilled but maybe haven't had the exposure, maybe haven't had the practice of writing these summaries, because they're just not selected, and so they deselect themselves.
Something that really stood out to me on the on our last conversation was when Nicole pointed out that people want to see people like them, and that comment has not left me ever since. Is that representation? Yes, sure, you could have 12, 15 blokes up there, but then that's going to alienate a whole load of people who want to see people like them. You want to know that there are people in the industry that are like you, and that really kind of hit home.
And it means that you think that industry isn't for me. That is, and so you're losing talent.
Exactly. I mean, this thing triggers me no end. That I could talk about this for so long, because the point also, there are so many points to be made around the merit argument, which is ridiculous, because it's there. So let's start from how define merit. You tell me that you've chosen based on merit. How do you define merit? So, and when you look at the merits, like, okay, it's the schools they went to. I'm just giving you an example. Well, how were they able to go to those schools? It could be based on however much money their parents had. So is that a merit? That can't be. Or also it's the exposure thing. And the exposure is so closely related to the representation issue. And I can assure you that, Lee, as you know very well, because it was you who named me, but there was another event, totally well-meaning, not at all, but they didn't have any women in the lineup, and I was called to go, and I went because it was an online event. But if it's not online and you're the only woman called to go into a room with hundreds of men, you're not going to feel comfortable, and that's why representation is important. And then in that sense also, an event that doesn't have any diversity, what happens is that it's not as interesting, because it will only ever present one point of view, and that's where what the danger is. But I think that there's work to be done, because some of these people, they'll go, like Jan said, you just go, oh God, you're absolutely right. I hadn't thought of that. I need to sort this out. I didn't mean this. But some others will go, yeah, so what? It was on merit, and so the hope is that the seed goes in, and they maybe next time, even just not to get the backlash, next time they will think about it.
Well, also there's also quite a nasty implication in there. Oh, well, it was done on merit. So women aren't good enough. So basically what they were saying is, well, it was done on merit and women are just not up to the task, because they were called out specifically on having an all-male lineup. That's quite an insidious thing to believe. And it, and I think that it's something as well that we've spent a lot of time trying to tackle in tech, but women can't do tech, women can't code, so.
Which is a load of rubbish. My daughter is doing very well learning coding, and I will be handing her the business at some point.
But to add salt to the wounds, it's basically what they, instead of saying, oh, we're really sorry and we'll do better next time, is instead they made the whole thing worse by basically saying, well, women just aren't up to the task. So,
Yeah.
Peter, you've got a good follow up for this. Oh, sorry, carry on, Dan.
If you're going through that blind selection
I
process
do.
for speakers,
Yeah.
all you can go on is the information that you have. And if you go through the process of removing any identifiable information, and if you then go through that process, and at the end, let's say you're looking for 10 speakers, your top 10 speakers are all of a particular gender, then you've obviously got to ask the question about opening up the conversation around positive discrimination to try and ensure that actually if we're still in this situation where we've still got the same gender or the same race that are all at that top level, then first ask the question: is there something wrong in our process? Is there something else that we need to be doing earlier on in the process to ensure that we don't end up in this situation? But if you are trying to do as much as you can with with the information that you have, then it would be the right time to have that conversation around positive discrimination to ensure you can open up the opportunity for individuals that have less opportunity for exposure at that level.
That's it. And I mean, that feeds into my next question, which also triggers me hugely, which is the other argument that they bring up, which is yeah, but women have had every opportunity to apply and they didn't, which is like, well, yeah. Before I tell you what I think about that, let's hear what you think about that. How would you respond? Because I can think of a few things.
Yeah, I mean, Brian's already said it. I think there is a systemic issue there. You need to go further back into the application process to find out what is going on, because if you're in that situation and you're trying to fob off responses like this, I'm afraid there is a greater issue that does need to be looked at. And
absolutely,
it's going to be early on in the process.
Yeah,
absolutely. And the thing is, just one thing about positive discrimination, because it's such a thorny issue, and it's what people get jump on about. It's like, for every woman that gets positively discriminated, she was probably looked over discriminated over 1 million times in her life. A woman or a person of color or person in a wheelchair, there were 1 million times when they were discarded because of their situation. So if it happens once, it's obviously they have to be right. You can't be someone that doesn't isn't good enough for the task or anything like that, obviously. But at parity of skill, that's a counter argument to that, I feel.
Yeah, I think that anyone whose initial reaction when they hear about positive discrimination, they should actually recognize how that feeling of, oh, that's not fair. They should kind of recognize how the other person might have felt, 100 times a day. That feeling of like, well, that's just not fair. Imagine that's your daily experience. Imagine that, just this once that person has got a break. Imagine that unfair feeling, kind of happening again and again. And we're not talking about, what we're talking about is redressing a terrible imbalance while we sort out while we sort out our industry. We need to do better. And one day, everybody, even people that apparently benefit from positive discrimination, everybody wants there to just be a point where everyone is on the same level, where there's an equal playing field for everyone. Everyone wants to achieve that. We are so far from that we have to do things while we try and get into a better place. We have to do things to make it fairer while we're fixing everything that's wrong in our, we're talking about our industry. It's the world, but, let's start with our industry and then move on to the world.
Exactly.
Love it. And speaking of our industry, what I can imagine is when you have these elicitation processes, these blind testing processes, you do this through a website. So when we are looking for speakers and we have these blind auditions, they have to send us something through a website. Also, my question tailors a little bit into the more front end of building websites for our customers. How do we ensure that those websites that we build, like all the forms or the iconography or the images, everything essentially is inclusive?
This is another thing that me and Dan were talking about earlier, and I was saying, kind of in a way, accessibility. As developers, we understand that. We have like software that tells us if we're hitting certain targets, kind of around color contrast and stuff like that. But then today, I saw that news article about the Coca Girl, the new magazine for black girls, because her mother realized that her daughter had never seen a girl like her in a magazine aimed at her age group. And so this girl said she hated her hair and her complexion, and her mother was really upset and said she needs to see herself. She needs to know that she's beautiful, and you can only your ideals are based on what you see around you. And I said to Dan that accessibility we can measure, but actually inclusivity also means other things, subtle things that are harder to measure. And that means things like, people being represented, people across the board, all different types of people being represented in your content, which as developers, we don't have numbers, we don't have values. We know, although I said to Dan, I have done things for a client and I've gone, right, the color contrast is really good. Everything's come up green, fantastic. And you give it to someone and they still go, I can't read this. but at least we know to a certain extent steps that we need to take around something like accessibility. But content, is just as important.
It's again a real tricky one. We've had this with design teams where we want to ensure. So, for example, through Big Orange Heart, we want to try and ensure that our imagery is as inclusive as possible. We want to ensure that when people visit the site, they feel that they can associate themselves with what they're seeing on screen. But we've had conversations with design teams where we've said, look, we need to ensure that these images are inclusive. And occasionally we've come back and they haven't been. And we go back to the design team. We say, look, this is what we need to be looking at. And it suddenly feels like it starts becoming a tick box exercise, which is an awful situation. And trying to get that message across, and trying to discuss how do we ensure that the imagery and the feel, the look when people visit the site, people can link with. And when you say that we need to ensure that the imagery is inclusive, and you get back an image that has one person of color, one white person, one person in a wheelchair, and it just suddenly feels very, very wrong, that whole process. And I don't have the answer to it, because we want to ensure that there are imagery. We use illustrated images on the site, and we want to ensure that we're trying to represent as wide a breadth of individuals as we can. But it's at what point does it do you say, well, actually we don't want that image with an individual in a wheelchair, because suddenly it feels like you're pushing too hard to go the other way with inclusivity around it. And that's a really difficult conversation that we've had several times, and unfortunately I don't have an answer to it.
It's not an official question. It's just something that's on my mind. I'm listening to this conversation, and all of this is wonderful. And on the flip side, I can imagine that somebody might now start to feel really, really overwhelmed. They've recognized that they have not necessarily thought in an inclusive manner, or have, in error excluded other people. And again, that's not meaning to, but that's just the way things happen over time. And again, background privilege situation, whatever that may be. So now they're thinking, right, I need to make sure that I am being more inclusive. And I can imagine somebody almost becoming kind of stuck to the ground. I don't know, maybe a magazine article writer suddenly gets writer's block now, because they're trying to work out, oh no, how on earth do I write this without excluding somebody or upsetting somebody or designing a website or showing up on a live stream, because suddenly at the back of your mind you're like, right, I need to be inclusive. So I guess my very short version of the question is there any sort of framework or filter that I can sanity check the things that I'm going to do so that I don't get caught up in this permanent loop of I'm never actually going to launch because I'm actually petrified I'm going to hurt someone?
I think first of all, being aware, has to be like the first step. And I don't think that there's necessarily a process. I think that you have to recognize that making changes is good. You're going to make mistakes. You're not going to be perfect. It's continually evolving. So you do the best that you can, and the next time you do better. And that's all that anyone can do. I don't think that anyone should go, oh my God, I can never do anything again because I'm not going to get it right. You're not going to get it right. You are not going to get it right. You're going to make mistakes. And then the next time you do it, you're going to make all new mistakes. But at least you're trying. And every time you try, you'll do better. That's life. That's the same with everything. So you're not going to be perfect, and you are going to make mistakes, and people are going to be excluded, and people are going to be hurt, and you just carry on and you do, and every time you aim to do better, and that's.
If you've got somebody themselves, then that is good. We need to be questioning ourselves, and we need to be asking, is this? And if you've got somebody that isn't, going through that process, then maybe there are other issues in relation to inclusivity there that needs to be discussed. But
it's like because I think that there's this feeling that making a mistake is a bad thing, but it's not. If you do user experience, it's all about, the more mistakes you make, the better, because it means that you can improve. You now know what's wrong. It's like, oh, phew, now I know how to do that one, and you do it better next time. So I think that we should sort of leave the culture of, oh my God, I've made a mistake, terrible, I should be punished. No, it's the opposite. It's like, okay, I didn't see that one, but now I know, amazing, brilliant. So I can get it right next time. So I think
a lot of that's fed, isn't it, as well, by seeing online when somebody makes a mistake, they get fired, don't they? And it's a big, massive issue, and that mistake kind of follows them around and stays with them for a long time. So I think a lot of that will be feeding people's kind of panic on, oh my gosh, I recognize I need to be inclusive, but I don't want to upset anyone. Karen.
I was going to say that there's been some obviously some instances where people have been fired, but usually that's not been an honest mistake with people trying to do their best. That's usually been outrageous behavior that it's just absolutely if you are trying your best, and if you are learning from your mistakes, and really we only learn from our mistakes. We only learn when someone points out to us that we've done something wrong. If you're trying your best, the majority of people will understand that you're trying your best. The majority of people recognize that we're all a work in progress. And if it's an honest mistake, and you have the best intentions, and you keep improving, and you keep saying to people, if they come to you and they say this was an issue, and you say I'm sorry, we'll do better next time, most people will be glad with that. You're not saying, well, women just aren't up to it. You're actually saying, I'm sorry, we recognize that we made a mistake. We will do better next time. And engage with the community that kind of that you've marginalized that time. Say to them, how can we do better next time? What did we do wrong? How can we change that? What barriers did we put in your way? And that's how you improve. So I think that it's not so much the making the mistakes as well. It's what you do after. It's your response to being told you've made a mistake makes all the difference.
Yeah, exactly. It's because mistakes, really, they are opportunities. That's what they are. And so don't be overwhelmed. Just think, okay, I definitely won't get it right, but hopefully people will show me the way. My mistakes will show me the way, and people won't judge me. Because I think we've all got these fears sort of instilled from squirrel culture, whatever you want, that, you know, that then, oh my God, you failed, or you will be judged, you know, you won't go on holiday this year, or, you know, so that's,
there's always going to be as well, probably, you know, that there's a difference between genuine concerns from the community that you may have inadvertently marginalized, and someone trolling. I think that, you know, kind of that there's a big difference. There's always going to be somebody that tells you, you know, kind of that you have to be able to recognize, you know, when, you know, kind of like when you've genuinely made a mistake, and engage with that and learn from that. And you also have to recognize when, you know, kind of that when there is just someone just venting for whatever reason. I think that's I think there's a big difference between, you know, the two things.
There's a
Carry on, Peter.
Carry on. No, just an example from our sort of our sphere, the tech sphere, the company. Do you remember, guys, when Convertkit changed name very briefly? Do you remember? Convertkit did a rebrand. They did a rebrand, and they changed name from Convertkit to Seva. And Seva is a word in Hindi that means being of service, something, you know, something like that. And they, you know, it took them a long time to make the decision. They were really excited about the change because they love to be of service and help and so on. And so it meant they were very, very 100% behind the rebrand. The moment they launched, can you imagine a rebrand of a company that's fairly big? I think now Convertkit must be fairly big, and they launched, and they had a new logo everywhere and a new name. And the big part of the Asian community completely rose up in well done, Lee. That's the article they came up with. They rose up in arms, saying no one was horrible to them, but they all said this is cultural appropriation. You have no idea what this means for us. You can't use this concept for your company. It's not yours to use. You know, making really good points and really good arguments. And Convertkit were amazing. They just said, we got it wrong. We are so sorry. We did not realize that this is fundamentally wrong, and therefore they just went back to Convertkit. They just took it in their stride completely. You know, I can imagine at a high financial loss, but a huge gain in other ways. And my God, did I respect them then? I mean, I always knew they were a good company, but then I was like, wow, that's the way to do it. That is actually the way to do it. That's a great example. And they stayed afloat. I'm sure they cost them money, but they, you know, they're thriving still. So hats off to them. And that's definitely an example that can be made.
Yeah, and the goodwill. Oh, sorry. I was going to say the goodwill that they probably got from actually doing the right thing. I'm sure, you know, offset whatever losses they may have had from the rebranding.
I'd encourage people to check out the URL that's on screen. You can see, for example, they have hit everything, every question, well, not every, but many of the common questions as well. For example, why didn't you know about the cultural significance of Seva before you rebranded? And they actually say this was the biggest mistake we made in the process. We did our research, but and they kind of go into what they should have done. What I've tried to do from this as well is kind of create my tweetable, because I'm one of those people who needs to be able to say it succinctly, what I've learned from this kind of conversation that we're talking about being worried about making mistakes. And I think what we're saying is that we learn from mistakes, and we should try our best with honorable intentions. That's a very important element, because we can make mistakes with those honorable intentions rather than just being an arse. Sorry, I don't know if we're allowed to swear on this. Arse isn't swearing. Keep improving based on feedback, as you will not get it right every single time. And actually, the conversation and awareness is the most important part. So do something with the right intentions to the best of your ability. And when you make the mistakes, because you will, learn from them and improve. And I think also what I didn't kind of cover from that was the fact some people will troll you. So always sanity check. Sanity check the feedback, because sometimes people are just being idiots. Maybe they're angry about something else and you're their target.
Yeah. Yeah. I use the Seva example. I use it in various circumstances, but one of them is to say research. If you, I mean, you still will probably make mistakes, but research is so important. There is a way, and that is research, because you will know who you're talking to. Make sure that you do understand who everybody is, and just do your research. I think it helps a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, as we come into land, it would be great to learn a little bit more about Big Orange Heart. So, Dan, could you just share with us a little bit about what you guys are up to and how people can get plugged in?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So, as I mentioned at the start, Big Orange Heart is a charity that supports and promotes positive well-being and mental health within the remote working communities. We have a thriving community of individuals that are delivering an incredible level of peer-to-peer support, and we've got access to mental health professionals as well. So we have quite a wide range of services that we deliver through Big Orange Heart. We have, as many have been, we've been very heavily impacted financially by the COVID crisis. Not only that, we've also seen an incredible uptake in the demand for the services. So any support into Big Orange Heart, both in terms of voluntary time and financially, at bigorangeheart.org/donate is always greatly appreciated. The community is we're very much community driven, so if you're interested in getting involved, then hitting the Big Orange Heart website, heading over to the volunteer button would be a great place to get started. We also have the option of to join and just become part of the community. If you are a remote worker at this time, dealing with challenges in relation to your well-being and mental health, then we are, as a team, we're there to support you.
So to recap, we've got donation, we have volunteering, we have joining, and now over to Peter.
Yeah, just to say that let's not downplay the role of the community and what it can do for you, because also in our industry that we're all on Slack anyway, and for me the Big Orange Heart Slack is useful in so many ways, including business. You can go in there and ask any question, it will be someone responding to it. So I really I hope that we can somehow all help you sail through the hard times, because I don't want to live in a world. I mean, I want to live in a world where Big Orange Heart is, there and thriving, because you are so important to. I have, I'm personally, as I say as often as I can, hugely grateful for what Orange Heart does for me, but Big Orange Heart does for me, but and many others, of course. But just the Slack community, guys. If anyone who's listening, try this Slack community out, because it's actually addictive, because it's such a nice place to be. You can say how you are, you can ask, you can help other people, you can get help. It's just a wonderful place.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I mean,
That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
I live
and
there
even
practically.
Everybody who's watching this, if you just can donate like $5 a month, I mean, it triples up. And I think we are all active donators and active supporters for Big Orange Heart, because we also use the services. So it just makes sense to give back. And even just the slightest amount of support and sharing the word is much more appreciated than the single person of us would probably estimate.
Dan, what might be really helpful is, could you kind of describe maybe one or two avatars of where someone might be who may need to use the Big Orange Heart service? Because often I think people will disqualify themselves from it because they think you have to be at a certain situation before you need to tap into Big Orange Heart. Could you maybe share that?
Absolutely. I mean, something we regularly see are individuals that are stepping out into the self-employed world, taking on starting a business, whether that be an agency or whether that be something completely different. That stepping out, they have a skill set. They're very, very good at something, and they think, right, okay, let's take this and turn this into a business. But what we often then hear in our conversations or discussions with these individuals is that they may not necessarily have the skills or the understanding or the awareness of many of the other things that come with being self-employed, and the many different hats that often individuals have to wear as self-employed small business owners. So we've opened up our we've pivoted. We were previously known as WP and Up, working within the WordPress community. Through the COVID crisis, we've actually moved over to support a much wider community, the remote working community. It had always been an intention of the charity to grow to support a wider community, but it was the current global crisis stepped that up in terms of its time frame. But it's also meant that we've seen a much wider range of individuals, skilled individuals coming through. So if you are an individual that works in a remote environment, whether you're employed, whether you're self-employed, whether you're working for an agency as part of a distributed team, then the support services provided by Big Orange Heart are there for you as an individual. We're not excluding any group in relation to the support that we're providing.
That's good. Like I said, I think a lot of people would think, oh, well, I think I'm okay. I just struggle a little bit here, or I'm a bit anxious about this over here. So, I don't need to waste that. I don't want to waste their time. And Peter hit the nail on the head that it's about community. So even if you think you don't need the services, getting plugged into the Slack community allows you to support other people and equally be blessed through that, because that we are all struggling with something in some sort of way. So being a part of that community is essential. On the flip side, I'm kind of thinking of someone who may be just feeling absolutely dreadful, anxious, depressed, whatever's going on, very lonely, because this is a lonely time as we are in lockdown, and kind of hit rock bottom. How would they best connect with you guys? What's the best link to hit on your website if they are in that sort of position?
So if you're in that sort of position, Big Orange Heart /contact. There are a number of ways and forms of contacting us, whether that's through phone, email, live chat. There is even a chatbot on there, which some individuals like, due to the anonymity that the chatbot offers. But yes, we have a wide variety of services that we can deliver for individuals. So, as you've mentioned, if you're in that kind of situation where just simply want to connect with somebody, you feel like you're spending a lot of time on your own, or you may have questions about how to take the business forward. We've got a wide variety of community members that have a huge amount of knowledge that individuals have been very happy to share experiences and knowledge with the community to support them.
Thanks very much.
We run life groups within our within the charity, and those life groups have become a real source of
savers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really good. Everyone, get involved. Best link probably is Big Orange Heart /join to get into that Slack community, get to meet some of these amazing people. If you can, please donate. If you have time to volunteer, check out the options for volunteering. And if you're in one of those kind of tougher places and you're not sure the best way, you just want to speak to a human, hit that contact link. So, folks, with that, we've learned an awful lot. I've learned an awful lot as well. I'm loving this selfishly because this means that I'm expanding my own knowledge base and being challenged to think different, and Apple, I think, own the copyright to that statement that I just made, so I'll send them a check. Before we go then, shall we do our usual little how we connect with everyone, and then we'll do our cheesy wave. So shall we start with Peter and work our way round to Dan, Diane, Jan, and end with me? How about that? Peter, how can everyone connect with you?
Please find me in my Facebook group, Design for Geeks.
Dan?
Yeah, that's it, really.
Yeah, excellent. Pretty much anywhere /Dan maybe to connect with me personally. That's DANMABY. Or, of course, bigorangeheart.org.
Diane?
It's probably Twitter for me. So _Diane Wallace, all one word, DIANEWALLACE. And my DMs are open.
Sweet. Jan?
For me, it's the WP Mastery Facebook group and the Slack channel of Big
Awesome.
Orange Heart.
And then me, agencytrailblazer.com, and hit that Facebook community link. Folks, you're all awesome. If you got this far and you watched the replay, please let us know. If you've been watching, please let us know what your biggest takeaway from this is. If you have any answers to any of the questions that we asked during this broadcast that you would like to share, opinions, whatever that is, we need to have a conversation. This is a conversation, and it's worth learning, what your opinion is, how you would deal with the situations that we've discussed. And obviously, finally, if you are affected by anything we've discussed with regards to Big Orange Heart, then please do connect with them and or support and get plugged in. Thank you so much, everyone. You're all awesome. We're about to do a cheesy wave. Cheerio, everyone.